April 1st, 1945. Okinawa. A young American soldier crouches in absolute darkness, wearing something the enemy has never seen. A weapon that turns night into day. In 7 days, he and 149 others will kill nearly a third of all Japanese casualties without the enemy ever knowing what hit them. They'll force an entire army to abandon their deadliest tactic. And then, they'll vanish from history. This is the story of the men who could see in the dark. The rain comes first as mist, then as needles, then as sheets that turn the volcanic ash of Kakazu Ridge into black soup that sucks at Private First Class Robert Chun's boots with every step. It's 30 minutes past midnight on April 1st, 1945, and he cannot see his own hand in front of his face. The darkness here is absolute, primal, the kind that makes a man's pupils dilate until they ache, searching for light that doesn't exist. Somewhere out there, beyond the lip of the foxhole, beyond the churned earth and shattered coral limestone, the Japanese 62nd Division waits in silence. Chun shifts the weight on his back and the straps bite deeper into his shoulders. The backpack unit weighs 27 pounds fully loaded, heavy as a second man clinging to him, and inside it batteries larger than anything he's ever seen outside an automobile churn out power for the device mounted to his M3 Carbine. The T3 infrared spotlight sits on top of the barrel like a cyclops eye, and clamped to the receiver is the M2 sniper scope, modified, experimental, its internals filled with cascaded image intensifier tubes and photoelectric cells that are supposed to translate invisible infrared light into something human eyes can perceive. It looks like something from a Buck Rogers serial. Feels like black magic. He is one of 150 men in the entire Pacific Theater carrying this equipment. 150 men who've been handed the night itself, gift-wrapped in vacuum tubes and wire. The M3 Carbine system, top secret, experimental, so new that most of the division doesn't know it exists, so strange that even the men trained to use it aren't entirely sure they believe in it. But tonight, on this ridge, with the rain drowning out every sound and the darkness swallowing everything, Robert Chun is about to become a believer. The Battle of Okinawa began this morning, a lifetime ago, though only 14 hours have passed. Operation Iceberg, they're calling it. The largest amphibious assault of the Pacific War. 1,600 ships. 550,000 men. The 96th Infantry Division, Chun's outfit, came ashore on the Higuchi beaches expecting hell and found ghost towns instead. The Japanese had withdrawn, pulled back into the island's interior, and that absence felt worse than resistance. Felt like a held breath before a scream. Now, dug into positions along Kakazu Ridge's forward slopes, the 96th waits. The ridge is a coral fortress, a natural wall running east to west across the island's narrow waist. Behind it lies the Shuri Line, the main Japanese defensive position, miles of interconnected caves and tunnels and artillery emplacements carved into rock that American bombs can't touch. Between here and there is a killing ground measured in yards and paid for in lives. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight's problem is staying alive until dawn. Chun knows what happens in the dark. Every man in the division knows. They've heard the stories from Leyte, from Peleliu, from every other island where American boys have gone ashore. The Japanese own the night. They move through it like ghosts, infiltrating American lines in small groups, sometimes alone, slipping past sentries who can't see 3 feet in front of them. They come with grenades and bayonets and demolition charges, and they come in silence, and by the time you hear them it's too late. On Saipan, whole platoons were wiped out after dark. On Guam, infiltrators reached command posts and killed officers in their sleep. Darkness is their weapon, and American soldiers have been dying in it for 3 years. The War Department knows this. That's why Chun is here, in a foxhole on Okinawa instead of training at some base in the States, carrying 60 pounds of experimental equipment into combat on its first night of deployment. The men who designed this system, engineers at the Office of Scientific Research and Development at Eastern Kodak at Radio Corporation of America, they've been racing against time since 1943, trying to give American soldiers what the enemy already has, the ability to kill in the dark. The technology is revolutionary and it is insane. The T3 spotlight mounted to Chun's carbine emits light in the infrared spectrum, wavelengths too long for human eyes to detect. To a Japanese soldier looking directly at it, the spotlight is invisible, just another patch of darkness in a night full of darkness. But the light bounces off everything it touches, bodies, rocks, foliage, and those reflections return to the M2 scope mounted on Chun's rifle. Inside the scope, a photocathode converts the infrared light into electrons, which cascade through image intensifier stages, multiplying thousands of times, until finally they strike a phosphor screen that glows green. What Chun sees through that eyepiece is a ghost world, everything painted in shades of luminescent emerald, bright enough to pick out a man's face at 70 yards. It works. At least, it worked at Fort Benning at the proving grounds in controlled tests with known distances and cooperative targets. Whether it works here, in a monsoon, with live enemy combatants and the pressure of death breathing down your neck, is something else entirely. Chun has fired exactly 12 rounds through this weapon. He qualified with it 3 weeks ago in Hawaii, shooting at paper targets hung between palm trees while instructors in clean uniforms took notes on clipboards. The whole thing felt like a science experiment, not combat training. Now he's in the experiment. The man next to him in the foxhole is Corporal Eddie Martinez, a regular rifleman with a standard-issue M1 Garand and no special equipment. Martinez is 22 years old and looks 40 in the occasional flash of distant artillery. He's been in the Pacific since Guadalcanal. He knows things. "Can you see anything?" Martinez whispers. His voice is barely audible over the rain. Chun adjusts the scope, pressing his eye against the rubber cup. The backpack unit hums against his spine, a faint vibration he can feel through the harness. He flicks the activation switch on the spotlight. Nothing happens that he can see with his naked eye, but through the scope the world transforms. Green. Everything is green. The rain shows as diagonal streaks of lighter green against dark green sky. The ridge line ahead of them glows like something radioactive. Rocks and stumps and shell craters appear in sharp relief, all rendered in that eerie monochrome. He can see the broken bodies of 2 Japanese soldiers killed earlier today, 30 yards out, lying where they fell. He can see the jagged edges of coral outcroppings. He can see individual raindrops exploding against stones. It's like looking into an aquarium lit from within, beautiful and alien and deeply, profoundly wrong. "Yeah," Chun says. "Yeah, I can see." His voice cracks on the words. He's 19 years old, Chinese-American, born in San Francisco and raised speaking English and Cantonese in equal measure. He graduated high school in May of 1943 and was drafted in June. Basic training at Camp Roberts. Advanced infantry training at Fort Ord. Then Hawaii, then Okinawa, and now this, a hole in the ground on a ridge named for the village the Japanese burned when they fortified it. His parents think he's in supply. He writes them letters about unloading ships and playing cards. He doesn't mention that he's never been more terrified in his life. Time moves strangely in the darkness. Minutes stretch into hours. The rain continues its assault. Chun's hands go numb inside his gloves. The backpack straps saw at his shoulders. He keeps the scope to his eye, scanning, always scanning, sweeping the infrared beam across the approaches to their position. The green world shifts and flows. Nothing moves but rain. Then something does. 0147 hours. Chun will remember that time for the rest of his life, the way you remember the moment before a car accident. Everything suddenly crystal clear and moving in slow motion. He's panning the scope from left to right, watching nothing, when a shape separates itself from the darkness at 65 yards. At first he thinks it's a rock he missed earlier, something his tired eyes are inventing. Then it moves again, low to the ground, deliberate. A man crawling through the mud. Chun's breath stops. His finger finds the carbine selector switch, confirming it's set to semi-automatic. The M3 fires .30 caliber rounds, same as the standard M1 carbine, but the barrel is heavier, free-floating, built for accuracy. Effective range is 300 yards in daylight. At night, with the scope, maybe half that. This target is close. Too close. He can see the man clearly now through the green glow. Japanese uniform, sodden with rain. No helmet. The infiltrator is moving toward the American lines with patient precision, using every scrap of cover, advancing a few inches at a time. He carries something in his right hand. Chun can't tell what, but the shape is wrong for a rifle. A satchel charge, maybe. A grenade bundle. Something meant to kill many men at once. Behind the first infiltrator, 2 more appear. Then a 4th. They're spacing themselves 10 yards apart, advancing in a loose skirmish line that would be invisible to anyone without Chun's equipment. No one else in the foxhole chain can see them. To every other American soldier on Kakazu Ridge, the night is still empty. The enemy is still theoretical. Chun touches Martinez's arm. The corporal startles, brings his rifle up. Contact. Chun breathes. 4 men. 65 yards. Coming straight at us. Martinez peers into the darkness and sees nothing. You sure? The lead infiltrator is 60 yards out now. 55. Chun centers the scope's crosshairs on the man's torso. His heart is hammering so hard he's sure the Japanese can hear it. He's never killed anyone. He's never fired a weapon at a living human being. At Fort Ord they shot at paper. In Hawaii they shot at paper. This is not paper. I'm sure, Chun says. His voice is surprisingly steady. Then drop him. The M3 Carbine weighs 8 pounds loaded. It sits in Chun's shoulder like it was made for him. The trigger is smooth, requiring 5.5 pounds of pressure. He begins to squeeze, taking up the slack, breathing out the way they taught him. The green figure in the scope continues crawling forward, oblivious. 50 yards. 45. Chun fires. The sound is shockingly loud. A sharp crack that splits the night, and the carbine's recoil is modest but present, kicking back against his shoulder. Through the scope he sees the impact. The lead infiltrator jerks, rolls onto his side, becomes still. The green glow shows spreading darkness beneath him. Blood. Rendered colorless by infrared light. The other 3 infiltrators freeze. They're trying to locate the source of the shot, but Chun's muzzle flash was minimal. Another feature of the M3 design. A special flash suppressor that reduces visible signature. To the enemy, the shot came from everywhere and nowhere. Chun doesn't give them time to decide. He shifts aim to the second man, exhales, fires. Hit. The infiltrator collapses. Third target, tracking left. Fire. Miss. The man was moving. Adjust, lead slightly, fire again. Hit. The man stops crawling and doesn't move again. The 4th infiltrator is running now, abandoning stealth for speed, sprinting back toward Japanese lines in a crouch. Chun follows him with the scope, leads him, squeezes the trigger. The carbine cracks. The runner stumbles, catches himself, keeps going. Chun fires again. The man falls and stays down. Silence rushes back in, broken only by rain. For shots. For kills. 12 seconds from first trigger pull to last. Chun is shaking so hard he nearly drops the rifle. Martinez is staring at him like he's just watched a magic trick.
Jesus Christ, Martinez Vespers.
What the hell are you? Chun doesn't answer. He can't. He's looking through the scope at the bodies he just created. 4 men rendered in green phosphor who were alive a minute ago and are now simply objects in the mud. He expects to feel something. Horror, guilt, triumph, anything. But there's only numbness and the continuation of fear and the rain still falling. He killed them without them ever seeing him. They died not knowing why. Other men in other foxholes are shouting questions into the darkness. Did you see something? Who's shooting? What's happening? Martinez yells back that it's handled. Targets down. No friendlies hit. The questions fade. The tension remains. Somewhere out there, beyond the range of Chun's scope, the Japanese 62nd Division is dug into positions they've spent months preparing. They have 30,000 men on this island. They're not going anywhere. And this is only the first night. Dawn arrives as a gray suggestion behind eastern clouds, and with it comes the full scope of Okinawa's nightmare geography. Kakazu Ridge isn't a ridge so much as a coral scar, a serrated edge of ancient reef thrust up from the earth by volcanic fury millions of years ago. It runs roughly east-west across the island's narrow waist, maybe 600 yards long, and behind it the ground drops away into draws and ravines where the Japanese have established their true defensive positions. From the American perspective, attacking north, the ridge looks like a castle wall. From the Japanese perspective, defending south, it's a perfect place to let the Americans come and die. The rain has stopped, but the mud remains. Chun hasn't slept. None of them have. He sits with his back against the foxhole wall, the M3 Carbine across his lap, and watches the sunrise reveal what his scope showed him in the dark. For Japanese soldiers lie dead between his position and the enemy line, exactly where he saw them fall. In daylight they look smaller than they did through the infrared green, less like threats and more like boys in the wrong uniform. The closest one is maybe 16 years old. A Lieutenant Chun doesn't know appears at the foxhole rim, crouching low. Captain Morrison sent him, he says. Wants to see the M3 operator. Wants a report. Chun climbs out, leaving the backpack and scope behind, taking only his sidearm. His legs are stiff from the cold and the crouching. Everything hurts. He follows the lieutenant through a communication trench that's more like a scar cut into the ridge, past exhausted riflemen and machine gun positions and a mortar crew sleeping in shifts. The command post is a reinforced dugout 50 yards back from the front line, sandbagged and covered with a salvage tarp. Inside, Captain Morrison hunches over a map table lit by a kerosene lantern. He's 31 years old and looks 60. 2 days ago, he was a first lieutenant. Yesterday, his company commander caught shrapnel from a knee mortar. Now Morrison has the company. Chun, Morrison says without preamble. For confirmed kills last night. That right? Yes, sir. At what range? 65 yards initially. The fourth man was maybe 70 when I dropped him. Morrison exchanges glances with another officer, a major from battalion staff. The major's eyes are red-rimmed, haunted. And they never knew you were shooting at them? Not until the first one died, sir. Then they knew someone was shooting, but they couldn't locate the source. The infrared spotlight is invisible to them. To their eyes, I'm just another patch of darkness. The major shakes his head slowly, like a man trying to wake from a dream. 150 of these systems on the island. Only 150 out of 60,000 men. But you get 4 kills your first night out. Others got kills too, sir. I heard firing from 2nd Platoon sector, and from Easy Company's position on the western end. We know, Morrison says. He taps the map. 14 confirmed kills across the regiment last night. All from M3 operators. Every other weapon, every other soldier, nothing. Couldn't see to shoot. You boys are the only ones who could. He pauses, studying Chun with an expression that's part wonder, part something that looks like pity. You understand what that means? Chun doesn't, not yet. He will. The pattern repeats the second night and the third, and then every night after until it becomes the new normal, the new shape of darkness on Okinawa. The Japanese infiltrate and the M3 operators kill them, and the Japanese infiltrate again and die again, and slowly, too slowly for the men dying in the dark, but quickly by the standards of military adaptation, the enemy begins to realize something has changed. Robert Chun kills 6 men on the second night, 8 on the third. He stops counting after that. The kills blur together into a series of green shapes that move and then don't, rendered in phosphor-screen emerald-like targets in a shooting gallery. Sometimes they come in groups, sometimes alone. They crawl through gaps in the wire. They follow drainage ditches. They use the rain for cover and the wind to mask sound. They're good at this. They've been good at this for 3 years, and American casualties prove it. But they're not invisible anymore. Other M3 operators report similar results. Private Jenkins in Easy Company, 9 kills in 1 night. Sergeant Yamada with the 7th Division, operating on the eastern flank, 12 kills over 2 nights. Corporal Briggs, 7. The numbers accumulate in after-action reports that flow up through regiment to division to island command. Someone at headquarters, probably a logistics officer, maybe an intelligence analyst, starts doing the math. 150 M3 operators, representing roughly 3% of the infantry strength in the forward positions, are accounting for approximately 31% of all nighttime enemy casualties inflicted by rifles and carbines. Not mortars, not artillery, not machine guns, just individual soldiers with experimental rifles, shooting targets no one else can see. The ratio is impossible, absurd, the kind of combat effectiveness that doesn't happen in real warfare. Except it's happening. Every night. In the mud and the rain and the absolute darkness of Okinawa's April. The psychological impact on both sides is profound and it is growing. For American soldiers without M3 systems, the knowledge that invisible guardians are watching the dark creates a strange new confidence. Men sleep easier knowing the night has been claimed. For the Japanese, the realization that their deadliest tactic has been neutralized is devastating. Radio intercepts translated by Nisei linguists reveal confusion, then frustration, then something close to panic. How are the Americans seeing in the dark? What new weapon do they possess? The intercepted messages speak of ghosts, of soldiers who kill without being seen, of bullets that come from nowhere. On the seventh night, April 7th, Chun is in a different position, moved to plug a gap in the line where 2nd Platoon has taken casualties from artillery. The rain has finally stopped, but the darkness remains absolute. Cloud cover blocks moon and stars. Through his scope, the world is still green, still alien. He's scanning the approach routes, methodical, when he sees them. 23 Japanese soldiers, advancing in a dispersed formation, carrying satchel charges and Bangalore torpedoes. It's a full assault element, not an infiltration team. They're moving with purpose toward a weak point in the American wire, and if they reach it, they'll blow a hole wide enough to pour follow-on forces through. Chun keys the radio, another piece of specialized equipment, tied directly to the company command post. Contact, large element, 20+ enemy, grid coordinates. He reads off the numbers from the map tied to his wrist. Requesting fire support. The response comes fast. Mortars are already pre-registered on that position. Artillery can be on target in 3 minutes. But 3 minutes is too long. The enemy formation is 2 minutes from the wire. Engage at will. The radio crackles. Keep them pinned until fire support arrives. Chun begins shooting. Semi-automatic fire, aimed shots, 2 seconds between trigger pulls to reacquire. He drops the lead soldier, shifts to the next, fires. The M3's accuracy at these ranges is surgical. Each round finds its target. The Japanese formation falters. Men diving for cover, trying to locate the shooter. They can't. Muzzle flash suppressor and infrared spotlight make him a ghost. Other M3 operators are engaging now. Chun can hear their distinctive crack-crack-crack cadence up and down the line. Other invisible men shooting at targets only they can see. The Japanese formation disintegrates. Some men try to advance. Others try to retreat. All of them die in the green glow of American night vision. When the mortars finally arrive, falling like hammer blows from God himself, there's almost nothing left to kill. After action report, April 8th. Enemy night infiltration attempts have decreased by 60% over the past 48 hours. Japanese forces appear to be shifting tactics, abandoning small unit night attacks in favor of remaining in fortified positions. M3 effectiveness confirmed across all sectors. Translation: the Japanese have surrendered the night. What the after-action reports don't capture, what the statistics and percentages and efficiency ratios cannot convey, is the cost of seeing in the dark. Not the monetary cost, though at $2,000 per system the M3 units are expensive enough that only 1,700 were built during the entire war, but the human cost, the thing it does to a man's mind to kill from invisibility. Robert Chun stops sleeping. When he closes his eyes, he sees the green glow, the phosphor screen world that overlays his memory of normal sight. He sees shapes moving through emerald rain. He sees men die in silence, rendered in monochrome, their deaths becoming just another data point in the night's tally. His hands shake during the day. He can't eat. The other men in his squad treat him differently now, with a mixture of respect and unease, the way you might regard something powerful but fundamentally unnatural. Martinez tries to talk to him about it. They're sharing a cigarette in the ruins of what used to be a Okinawan farmhouse, sheltering from afternoon rain. The battle has moved north, toward the Shuri line proper. But the fighting is constant and the casualties are mounting and the island is eating American lives at a rate that makes even hardened veterans blanch. "You good?" Martinez asks. His voice is careful. "Yeah. You don't look good." "I'm fine." Martinez takes a drag, exhales smoke that mingles with the rain mist. "You know it's not personal, right? What you're doing out there. It's not murder. It's war." "I know what it is." "Do you?" Chun doesn't answer. How can he explain what it feels like to kill men who never see you coming, who die not in battle but in slaughter, who have no chance and no warning and whose last moments are spent in confusion and darkness? The Japanese soldiers he kills are trying to kill him. He knows this, accepts it, but the asymmetry of the M3 system makes it feel less like combat and more like execution. They crawl through the night with courage and skill and determination, employing tactics they've perfected over years of jungle warfare, and he erases them from existence with a squeeze of a trigger they never see coming. "I can see them," Chun says finally. "Through the scope. I can see their faces. Every single one." Martinez nods slowly. "Yeah," he says. "I figured." They don't talk about it again. The M3 program's success ripples beyond Okinawa, beyond the immediate tactical situation. In Washington, at the War Department, planners are already envisioning the next phase. Japan itself. The invasion of the home islands, Operation Downfall, scheduled for November. Intelligence estimates project American casualties in the millions. Anything that can reduce those numbers is being fast-tracked. The M3 represents a revolution in infantry combat capability. Orders go out. Increase production. Train more operators. Have units ready for the invasion. Manufacturers gear up. Thousands more systems enter production. Training programs expand. The technology is still experimental, still prone to failure. The image intensifier tubes burn out, the batteries drain faster than expected, the whole system is too heavy and too fragile, but it works well enough to matter. In the calculus of total war, well enough is good enough. But the calculus changes on August 6th, when a B-29 named Enola Gay drops a single bomb on Hiroshima. And it changes again on August 9th, when Boxcar does the same to Nagasaki. And it changes a final time on August 15th, when Emperor Hirohito announces Japan's surrender in a radio broadcast that most of his people have never heard his voice before. The war ends. Operation Downfall is cancelled. The invasion forces stand down. And the thousands of M3 Carbine systems still in production, still in training pipelines, still being refined and improved, are suddenly obsolete before they ever see combat. The program is quietly shelved. The weapons are warehoused. The technology is classified and forgotten, buried in the avalanche of war's end. Robert Chun comes home to San Francisco in November 1945. He's 20 years old. He weighs 30 pounds less than he did when he shipped out. He doesn't talk about Okinawa. His parents don't ask. The city has moved on, celebrating victory, rebuilding, looking forward. He gets a job in his father's grocery store. He goes to night school on the GI Bill. He marries a girl from his neighborhood. He has children. He lives a normal life, the kind of life that would have been impossible if the war had continued, if the invasion of Japan had proceeded as planned. He never tells anyone about the M3 Carbine. The technology remains classified for years. When it's finally declassified, no one cares. It's ancient history, a footnote in a conflict full of footnotes, overshadowed by atomic bombs and aircraft carriers, and the grand strategic movements that shaped the war's outcome. The fact that 150 men with experimental rifles changed the tactical picture on Okinawa, that they forced an entire army to abandon their most effective tactic, that they represented the first practical deployment of night vision technology in combat. None of it makes the history books. None of it is taught. None of it is remembered. The caves come later, after the night. When the Japanese realize they can no longer move under cover of darkness, when American night vision makes infiltration suicide, they withdraw deeper into Okinawa's interior. They pull back into the Shuri line, into the elaborate network of tunnels and caves and underground fortifications they've spent months preparing. They turn the island into a fortress, and the battle becomes a different kind of horror. Close quarters combat in the dark, flamethrowers and grenades and bayonets, fighting from room to room and tunnel to tunnel. The casualties mount. The rain continues. The island becomes a charnel house. But the nights are quiet. The infiltrations stop. American soldiers sleep without fear of waking to a grenade in their foxhole, without the dread that characterized every previous Pacific Island campaign. It's a small mercy in an ocean of horrors, but it's real. The M3 operators made it real. Robert Chun participates in the cave fighting. His M3 system is less useful in underground tunnels where ranges are measured in feet, not yards, but he uses it anyway. The infrared spotlight can penetrate the absolute darkness of sealed chambers. The scope can see around corners using reflected light. He clears bunkers. He shoots men at point-blank range. The war grinds on and he grinds with it, another soldier doing his duty, waiting for an end that seems like it will never come. When it finally does come, when the surrender is announced and the shooting stops and men emerge from their holes to find themselves alive against all odds, Chun feels nothing at first. The relief comes later, in waves that catch him unprepared. He'll be walking down a street in occupied Japan, or sitting in the transport ship heading home, or lying in his bunk at night, and suddenly he'll realize, I'm alive. The knowledge is staggering every time. The M3 Carbine is not the first night vision device. German forces experimented with similar technology in 1945, mounting infrared spotlights and converters on STG-44 rifles and Panther tanks. The Soviets developed their own systems. But the M3 is the first to see significant combat use, the first to prove the concept in actual warfare, the first to demonstrate that seeing in the dark is not science fiction but tactical reality. The principles that made it work, image intensification, infrared illumination, photoelectric conversion, become the foundation for everything that follows. In Korea, American forces deploy improved night vision devices based directly on M3 technology. In Vietnam, the Starlight scope gives soldiers third-generation night vision, capable of amplifying ambient light without needing infrared illumination. By the Gulf War, night vision is standard issue, so ubiquitous that fighting in darkness becomes an American advantage rather than a vulnerability. Today, every infantry platoon has soldiers equipped with devices that would have been considered magic in 1945. The lineage traces back to Okinawa, to 150 men with experimental rifles, carrying car batteries on their backs, shooting targets no one else could see. They were the proof of concept. They were the prototype. They were the first generation of soldiers who owned the night. And then they were forgotten. The forgetting happens gradually, the way most forgetting does. The men who used the M3 systems come home and don't talk about them. Security classifications keep the technology secret. The dramatic narratives that emerge from the war, Iwo Jima's flag raising, D-Day speeches, the Bulge's desperate stand, crowd out smaller stories. By the 1950s, when the technology is declassified, it's already obsolete, replaced by better systems. By the 1960s, it's trivia. By the 1970s, it's forgotten. Archives hold the documentation. After-action reports filed by company commanders. Production records from manufacturers. Training manuals stamped confidential. The weapons themselves survive in small numbers, sitting in museums or private collections, their significance unclear to casual observers. They look like regular carbines with strange attachments, curiosities from a war full of curiosities. The men who used them carry the memories alone. Robert Chun never meets another M3 operator after the war. He doesn't know if any of them are still alive. He doesn't know how to find them. The Army doesn't organize reunions for experimental weapons programs. There are no veterans groups for night vision operators. He is simply a man who did something that no one else can quite understand, in a war that everyone wants to remember differently. He dies in 1998, at age 72, in a hospital bed with his children around him. Among his effects they find a photograph, black and white, creased with age. A young soldier in combat gear, holding a strange-looking rifle with a scope and spotlight attached, wearing a backpack that looks too large for his frame. He's not smiling. Behind him is jungle and mud and men with exhausted faces. The photograph has no caption. His children don't recognize the weapon. They keep the photo anyway, filing it with other mementos of a life they only partially understood. Modern infantry combat happens largely at night. American military doctrine emphasizes darkness as an operational advantage. Soldiers train with night vision equipment from basic training onward. The technology has advanced beyond recognition. Fourth-generation tubes that amplify light 50,000 times, thermal imaging that sees body heat through walls, fusion systems that combine multiple sensing methods into augmented reality displays. A modern soldier sees better in darkness than a World War II soldier saw in daylight. This capability traces directly to April 1945, to Kakazu Ridge, to men like Robert Chun who proved that darkness could be conquered. The M3 Carbine was crude by modern standards, barely functional by comparison to today's technology. But it worked. It worked well enough to change tactics, to save lives, to demonstrate that night vision wasn't a fantasy but a military necessity. The men who used it represented 3% of infantry strength but inflicted 31% of nighttime casualties in their sectors. That ratio is extraordinary by any measure. It suggests not just technological superiority but a fundamental shift in combat dynamics. Before the M3, darkness was neutral territory, dangerous to both sides but more dangerous to defenders who couldn't see attackers coming. After the M3, darkness became controlled space, as dominated by American forces as the daylight skies were dominated by American aircraft. The Japanese command recognized this. Intelligence assessments captured after the war show their awareness that something had changed, that American forces possessed a new capability they couldn't counter. They abandoned night infiltration tactics not out of choice but necessity. The cost had become prohibitive. The M3 operators were killing infiltrators at rates that made the tactic unsustainable. This changed the shape of the battle. Without the ability to infiltrate at night, Japanese forces had to rely entirely on fortified positions, on the caves and tunnels of the Shuri Line. This made them predictable. It forced them into a defensive posture that played to American strengths. Overwhelming firepower, naval gunfire support, air superiority. The Battle of Okinawa was still brutal, still cost thousands of American lives, but it might have been worse. It certainly would have been different. What would have happened if the M3 program had been deployed earlier? If it had been available at Guadalcanal, at Tarawa, at Peleliu? How many American soldiers died in the night because they couldn't see infiltrators coming? The question is unanswerable but haunting. The technology existed. The theoretical knowledge was available by late 1942. But development takes time, testing takes time, production takes time. By the time the M3 was ready, the war was already winding down. 1,700 units were produced during World War II. Only 150 deployed to Okinawa. Thousands more were in production when Japan surrendered, destined for Operation Downfall, for the invasion that never happened. Those weapons were warehoused, eventually scrapped or sold as surplus. The investment in research and development, millions of dollars, thousands of man-hours, was essentially wasted from a purely financial perspective. But the knowledge wasn't wasted. The lessons learned from the M3 program fed directly into post-war research. Companies like ITT, RCA, and Hughes Electronics took the basic principles and refined them. The military poured funding into night vision development during the Cold War. By Korea, the technology had improved dramatically. By Vietnam, it was transformative. By Desert Storm, it was decisive. Every generation of night vision technology owes something to those first crude systems hauled onto Okinawan beaches. The image intensifier tubes, the infrared illumination, the whole concept of converting invisible light into visible imagery, all of it traces back to 1945, to an experimental program that barely lasted 3 months before the war ended. The men who used those systems didn't know they were making history. They thought they were just trying to survive. Robert Chun, in his foxhole on Kakazu Ridge, pressing his eye to a rubber-cupped scope and watching green shapes move through green darkness, wasn't thinking about military revolutions or technological lineages. He was thinking about staying alive until morning. He was thinking about the men beside him, and the men trying to kill them, and the terrible mathematics of survival. But history doesn't care about intentions. Cares about impacts. And the impact of those 150 men, scattered across Okinawa's ridges and draws, shooting targets no one else could see, ripples forward through decades of warfare. They were the first digital soldiers, in a sense, the first to fight through an electronic interface that mediated their perception of reality. Every modern soldier who sees through night vision goggles, who operates in darkness as comfortably as daylight, is their descendant. The rain returns on the final night Chun spends on Okinawa before the island is declared secure. It's late June now. The Shuri Line has fallen. Japanese resistance has collapsed into desperate last stands. The battle is effectively over, though men are still dying in caves and holdout positions scattered across the island's southern tip. Chun sits in a tent, cleaning the M3 Carbine for what might be the last time, and tries to remember what normal darkness feels like. He can't. 3 months of seeing the world in infrared green has rewired something in his brain. When he closes his eyes, he still sees that phosphor glow, still sees shapes moving through emerald rain. He wonders if it will ever go away. He wonders if he wants it to. The weapon in his hands is battered, worn down by constant use and Okinawa's brutal climate. The scope's housing is dented. The spotlight has mud ground into its seams. The backpack unit straps are frayed. But it still works. He's fired over 300 rounds through it, killed more men than he can count or wants to, and it's still functioning. The engineers would be proud. Someone from Division Intelligence comes around collecting the M3 systems. They're being inventoried, prepared for shipment to the invasion forces gathering for Operation Downfall. Chun hands his weapon over without ceremony. It feels strange to let it go, like giving up a part of himself. The intelligence officer signs a receipt, tells Chun he'll be issued a standard M1 carbine in the morning, says thank you for your service in that perfunctory way officers have when they're processing equipment instead of talking to people. Then it's gone. The rifle that made him invisible, that let him see in the dark, that turned him into something more and less than human. It's just another item on a logistics manifest, another piece of gear moving through the vast machine of American military power. Chun draws a standard carbine the next morning and it feels wrong in his hands. Too light. No backpack pulling at his shoulders. No scope to press against his eye. No green world waiting behind a rubber cup. Just wood and metal and the regular limitations of human vision. He's a regular soldier again, no different from any other rifleman in the division. Except he is different. They all are, the 150 men who used the M3 systems. They've seen what's coming. The future of warfare compressed into 3 months of desperate fighting. They know that darkness is just another spectrum to be conquered, another domain where technology will determine victory. They've lived in that future briefly, and now they're back in the present, carrying knowledge that no one else quite understands. The war ends 6 weeks later. The knowledge becomes memory. The memory fades. Life goes on. But the technology doesn't fade. It evolves, proliferates. It becomes so ubiquitous that soldiers in the 21st century can't imagine fighting without it. Night vision is as fundamental to modern infantry combat as ammunition or body armor. The assumption that darkness provides concealment is obsolete. The assumption that night favors the defender is reversed. American military doctrine now treats darkness as an advantage, a domain where superior technology creates decisive superiority. This transformation began with 150 men on Okinawa. They were the proof that it could be done. They demonstrated, in blood and mud and terror, that seeing in the dark was possible, practical, and devastatingly effective. Without that proof, would the military have invested so heavily in night vision development during the post-war years? Possibly. But those men made the case empirically in combat where it mattered most. They saved lives. Not just their own, though their survival rate was higher than average for their units. They saved the lives of men around them, men who slept easier knowing invisible guardians were watching the darkness. They saved the lives of soldiers who would have been killed in infiltrations that never happened, because infiltrating against M3 operators was suicide. The calculus is impossible to quantify precisely, but the direction is clear. The M3 program reduced American casualties at a crucial moment in a crucial battle. And then they were forgotten. Not deliberately, not maliciously, just the ordinary forgetting that happens when technology moves forward and context is lost. The M3 Carbine became a museum piece, interesting to collectors, meaningless to everyone else. The men who used it went home and stayed quiet. The war was over. There were more important things to remember, more dramatic stories to tell. But every soldier who's ever looked through night vision goggles owes something to those men. Every infantryman who's ever moved through darkness with confidence owes something to Robert Chun and the others like him, crouching in foxholes on Kakazu Ridge, watching green shapes move through green rain, pulling triggers that erase targets from existence. They were the first. They proved it could be done. They changed warfare forever. And then they came home and no one knew what they'd done, and the world moved on, and the night became something that could be seen through, conquered, controlled. All because 150 men in the spring of 1945 learned to see what no one else could see. The infrared light was invisible to the enemy. The impact wasn't. In 7 days, these men, representing 3% of their units, inflicted 31% of nighttime casualties. They forced an entire army to abandon its most effective tactic. They demonstrated a technology that would reshape warfare for generations. And they did it in the rain and the darkness and the mud of Okinawa, knowing that any night could be their last, carrying equipment that weighed more than they should have been able to bear, seeing a world that no human eyes had ever seen before. That's not a footnote. That's a revolution. It just happened to be a quiet one, fought in darkness, seen only through green phosphor glow, remembered by almost no one. Until now. If this story moved you, if you found yourself transported to Kakazu Ridge alongside Robert Chun and the other M3 operators, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to this channel. There are thousands of untold stories from World War II, moments of innovation, courage, and sacrifice that never made it into the history books, and I'm committed to bringing them to light. Hit the like button if you think this forgotten chapter deserves to be remembered, and share this video with anyone who appreciates military history, technological innovation, or simply stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Most importantly, I want to hear from you. What surprised you the most about this forgotten chapter of World War II history? Was it the technology itself, appearing decades before you thought night vision existed? The incredible combat effectiveness of such a small number of soldiers? Or the fact that this entire program has been almost completely erased from public memory? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read every one, and your insights often spark ideas for future videos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. And thank you for helping ensure that the men who fought in the invisible war are finally seen.